What does FNAF Help Wanted hide from the player off camera in the Night Terrors minigame? Whether you're stationed in the security office of an abandoned pizzeria, or acting as a night guard in a haunted horror attraction, fending off an onslaught of killer mascots is a pretty daunting task. In Night Terrors, there are no camera systems, Freddy masks, or steel doors protecting you though. Only a flashlight and your bedroom door stand between you and the nightmares that approach. Today, we'll be taking a look out of bounds at some things you're not usually able to see, like this messed up Nightmare Fredbear. We'll also be exploring the various rooms of Pizza Party and viewing how they work off camera. So I hope you enjoyed today's dive into Help Wanted. Now, as we move forward, I'll be recapping each night individually. That way we're all on the same page for what we'll be covering. So starting off with the first night, it's practically identical to the original FNAF 4 style of gameplay, as your main objective is to monitor the two hallways on either side of the player, as well as the closets in front of you. Funtime Freddy will attempt to reach the bedroom through the halls and must be deterred using our flashlight. You'd also be wise to listen for breathing when checking the doors, as failing to shut them when Freddy is present results in a jump scare. Bonbon and Bonnet are also threats in this level, though their jump scares are non-fatal. Bonbon will approach the player through the hallways similar to Funtime Freddy, except shining your light results in a jump scare instead of warding them off. Bonnet will appear inside the drawers and closets within the bedroom, and we must flash them with our light to make them leave. After turning the lights on, we can move the camera back for a better look at this bedroom area, where I immediately noticed this object sticking through the wall above the dresser. Upon closer inspection, it looks to be an incomplete version of the camera control panel, clock, and screen that we've seen used in previous minigames. I believe these assets are used a bit later on in this minigame's blacklight level, and this could simply be an oversight by the developers. We can also take a closer look at Bonnet while we're over here, where we'll find that she's just sort of floating inside the drawer. We'll be taking another look at them in just a second though. Moving the camera out into the hallway, we'll see that it just loops around at the end and brings us back to the other side. Just beyond the door, we can see the black pieces of geometry used to block the player's view of the hallway, and it's a bit more complex than the ones we've seen previously. There are actually several of these panels clipping through each other, and they'll be toggled on and off as we move to the door and activate our flashlight. As of right now, there are no animatronics present in the map, and this is because while inactive, they'll be stored beneath the level itself. Bonnet, Bonbon, and Funtime Freddy are all currently idle within the void, waiting to be pulled into the map. And when this occurs, you'll see that they are instantly warped to one of the predetermined locations. Something I was curious about is what happens when we close a door on an encroaching animatronic. As you can see, Freddy is currently at our door attempting to get us, and when closing the door, they will instantly warp back to their idle location. Something similar occurs when we shine a light on them in the hallway. They'll quickly step to the side, just out of the player's view before being moved. The other animatronics work a bit differently though. It turns out the Bonnet we see stored underneath the map is actually their jump scare model. This asset will be moved into the bedroom when they successfully jump scare us. But I was curious about what happens to this other model. Well, after some searching, I managed to find them floating sideways far beneath the rest of these idle characters. On the other hand, Bonbon's jump scare model will only be loaded in temporarily. The moment this is triggered, the Bonbon we typically see in the hallway will be moved back to the storage location as the scare plays out. Once completed, it'll be moved beneath the floor, where it then unloads completely. Heading into Night 2, there's only one adversary we must face, the Nightmarian. We must last until 6 AM as this horrific puppet endlessly approaches our bedroom, closing the door when they get close to avoid being jump scared. It gets much worse though, as a large hole has opened up in the ceiling and these dark tendrils will begin reaching out. They also come from the closet and underside of our bed, and we have to shine our flashlight on them to stop them from advancing. Brightening things up, we can have a closer look at the construction project in our ceiling, where we'll see that the hole leads directly outside of the map. Taking a look just beneath the closet doors, we'll find two separate pieces of text reading Bonbon Stat and Funtime Stat. Moving the camera to the end of the hall, we can find the Nightmarian asserting their dominance by T-posing against the wall. We can also watch from a different perspective as they walk down the hall, and they're actually pretty terrifying. After reaching the door, they'll freeze in place for a bit before ultimately jump scaring the player. Now, there isn't a ton to look at on this map, but what I was most curious about was how the tentacles work off camera. So when the tentacles begin to reach through the ceiling, they'll load in just above the roof and move downwards as they reach out. They look similar in appearance to the Nightmarian's arms, only they aren't connected to anything. We can also take a look beneath the bed, and although it's hard to see due to how dark this level usually is, these tentacles will simply clip through the floor as it begins stretching out into the room. Taking a look inside the closet, we can find two more of them entering the room from this empty space in the center of the level. We can also have a look at what happens when shining our flashlight at these disembodied appendages. And from a different perspective, you'll see that they will quickly retract to their starting position out of bounds before unloading. Jumping ahead to night 3, you'll find that you are now stationed inside the bedroom closet alongside a handful of plush babies. Shortly after the night begins, Circus Baby will enter the bedroom from one of the 2 doors on either side of the player, where they search the room briefly before spotting you. They then move into attack, and you'll have to close the doors before they reach you to avoid an untimely demise. With the doors closed, the plush babies surrounding you will begin violently shaking around, and remaining in the dark for too long results in a jump scare. You must survive until 6 a.m. as Circus Baby tirelessly hunts you down, with only a small margin of error being afforded to you. When viewed from a different perspective, we can see that there are 2 white, one-sided panels placed just within the doorway to the closet itself. Zooming a bit further out, we can see that this entire area is now contained within the same white sphere we've seen used in previous minigames. We can also watch from a different view as Circus Baby enters the room and attacks the player for the first time. She casually strolls into the room, well, as casually as a murderous animatronic can anyway, before turning her head towards us and beginning her approach. When she reaches the closet, she instantly swaps to this hunched over pose, which we can typically only see for a moment after initially closing the doors. Something else you may notice is that while we're holding them closed, the closet doors will begin to darken even though the lighting effects are completely disabled, which looks pretty strange. After enough time has passed, Circus Baby will teleport to a different location in the room where she begins her search once more. Something I find rather interesting is that this animatronic actually has more than one jump scare animation. As you probably know by now, the jump scares in Help Wanted generally take place in a separate location far above the map. But on this particular night, we can see that one of Circus Baby's jump scare animations actually takes place in the same spot as the original animatronic. As you can see, she'll lunge forward into the closet and scream in our face before unloading as the static screen appears in front of us. Now, while I was messing around this map, I noticed something kind of unsettling, and that is Biddy Bab just sitting next to the door near the player's discarded flashlight. Apparently, there is a chance that this small animatronic will spawn in during this night, similar to the endoskeleton in Mangle's vent repair level. As creepy as they look, they are completely harmless to the player, and are only placed here as a neat little Easter egg. It's cool to see them up close, however, considering the room is typically too dark to see a whole lot. At this point, I was curious what would happen if we warped the player to a different spot on this map. And as you can see, that did not go very well. No matter where the player controller is placed, our robotic foe will jump scare us inevitably if the doors are not closed. And to make matters worse, we lose the ability to shut said doors the moment the player leaves the closet. No matter how far we go, she is still able to catch us. Finally, we head into the 4th night, where our epic standoff against Nightmare Fredbear takes place. This night is similar functionally to the first night, as Nightmare Fredbear will approach the bedroom from both hallways and the closet in front of you. You must frequently check each of the doors, closing them when he's present in order to halt his approach. On occasion, he can also appear on the bed behind us, and we'll have to shine our flashlight on him until he leaves, or we will of course die. First things first, I flew over to the hallway to see where Nightmare Fredbear is placed before being moved into the map. And as you can see, he is T-posing at the end of the hallway just beneath the floor. Now, as this night plays out, you can hear Fredbear's footsteps coming from somewhere in the house. And the moment this occurs, we can see that Fredbear is moved slightly in the direction of the hallway he has chosen. As he proceeds onward, we can then watch as this horrifying character stomps towards our bedroom door. And even with the lights on, this hallway is now emitting dangerous levels of nope. Something we can see a bit easier with the lights on is what happens when we close the door with Fredbear in the hallway. And as you can see, closing the doors is completely unnecessary. The moment we start closing the door, he practically gives up and moves somewhere else. And in the case where Fredbear reaches the door, if it is not closed in time, he will enter the room to kill us. He teleports backwards a little ways before ducking through the doorway, and upon reaching the player, a jump scare will be triggered. Funtime Freddy also has an animation like this, only instead of a fully animated walk cycle, he will teleport a few times before ultimately catching us. Whether they're walking or teleporting, the only thing that can save you when they reach this point is the clock hitting 6 a.m. Otherwise, it's game over. Finally, when Nightmare Fredbear appears on the bed behind our player, we can fly beneath the map where we'll find he's not completely intact. Their severed head is sitting on top of the mattress, and his spinal column is clipping down through the bed and into the floor. He doesn't seem too bothered by this though, as his body is asserting dominance in the void below, T-posing into infinity. Truly glorious. There really isn't much to see on this particular night, so now let's dive into Pizza Party, this minigame's one and only blacklight level. So after loading into night 6, the player finds themselves in this bedroom location once more. Only now things look a bit different. There are plushies surrounding the player, and 2 doors directly in front of you. From here, you begin exploring this massive level, consisting of locations inspired by previous minigames. Each of these rooms has multiple doors that you can go through that ultimately lead you to a separate part of this huge, intertwining map. There are a handful of threats present as well, including animatronics that may attack you if you idle too long. In order to reach the end of this level, you must pass through Mangle's hallway and also enter the kitchen to choose a pizza topping. Once these prerequisites have been met, the office in the Fazbear's Fright hallway can now be accessed, which leads the player through a vent and into the party room. We then watch Glitchtrap as they pull the curtain aside and gesture the player to follow them behind the curtains. Following them results in the screen going dark, and after a brief moment, the curtain opens to reveal we're standing center stage within the pizzeria where the player usually selects a level. Now, rewinding time, I was curious to see how this level functions off camera. We can take a look at this bedroom area where we'll see that the hallways behind each door just lead into the void. Moving the camera through to the next section of the level reveals a couple of things. First, these other rooms are currently unloaded to lessen the impact on your machine, though there are a few assets still currently present within. When we go through one of these doors, the player controller will be moved to the corresponding location as the rest of the room's assets are loaded in. Arriving in the West Hall from the first FNAF game, you'll see that these hallways extend outward a short ways before coming to an abrupt end. The office that the first minigame takes place in is mostly intact too. On the far side of this hallway, there is a black barrier in place that prevents the player from seeing Bonnie, who is stored on the other side. After a bit of time has passed, Bonnie will simply walk through this object and into the hallway. From here I entered Mangle's hallway, and taking a look back at the previous room reveals that Bonnie has been reset to their starting position, and the rest of this room's assets are once again unloaded. In the present room, Mangle is stationed on the office ceiling of the FNAF 2 location, and will charge the player when the flashlight is activated. They will unload shortly before reaching the player, and if a door is not chosen in time, the player will be jump scared. Heading into the Fazbear's Fright hallway, we can see that there is a large steel door blocking our access to the office. Moving the camera aside, we'll see that the monitors used in the FNAF 3 minigame are now broken, and the security systems are non-functional. We'll be coming back here in just a moment, but for now, I went through the door on the right, which brings us back to the West Hall. Only now, the doorway on our left is inaccessible. Entering the door on our right brings us to the plush trap hallway, seen previously in the dark room minigames. Taking a look beyond these doors, there are no longer any walls separating these side rooms, though there are now one-sided black panels placed there instead. Leaving this hallway, I ended up back in the bedroom and went through the other door this time, leading to another FNAF 3 inspired hallway. Something I noticed after arriving here is that there's now a visible skybox within this level, which makes it a lot easier to see how this level is actually put together. Each of the rooms we explore in this level are stored within these individual black boxes, and if we fly inside of them, we can see some of the assets that are still loaded in. We can also see that the stage at the end of the game is loaded in, but we'll be taking a closer look at that in just a bit. Next, we enter the puppets room, which is surrounded by tables and balloons. This area is arranged on top of a large piece of checkered flooring, and the only walls present are the edges of the box this section is stored inside of. The puppets animation is practically identical to the one used in the FNAF 2 minigame, and the doors beside them don't lead anywhere. After passing through the Funtime Auditorium, we will arrive at this parts and service inspired location. This area has a few interesting things to look at, including these massive gears, entangled messes of wire, and a handful of doors we can enter. Taking a look beyond the elevator door directly in front of us, we'll see Ennard just sort of waiting here upside down. After the door opens, Ennard will unload a moment later, and staying here for too long will of course result in a jump scare. Taking the door into the kitchen, we find ourselves in this wide open space that is packed full of kitchenware, shelves, and other miscellaneous objects. There are two doors in front of us labeled cheese and pepperoni, and just to the right we'll find Chica herself standing guard. After shining our flashlight on them, Chica will activate and walk towards the player. Shortly thereafter, they'll be warped out of bounds, and the player must quickly choose a door to avoid being killed. After choosing one of the kitchen doors, we can now head back to the Fazbear's Fright hallway, where we'll see that a regular door is now in place of the steel one we had seen earlier. Taking a look inside, we'll find that the surveillance system and desk have been replaced by these tables, balloons, and presents as well. Heading through the vent in front of the player will take us to this area resembling Mangle's vent repair level. This version of the level is a bit more condensed though, and lacks most of the assets we had seen in that particular minigame. Also, there are no spooky endoskeletons beneath our feet, which is a plus. climbing through the vent above you takes you to the party room. This area has a handful of parts and service animatronics, as well as the cake and pizza we had selected earlier. There's a curtain in front of you that leads to a show stage, and just beyond it, we can find Glitchtrap just kind of dancing out of bounds. Now, I'll admit, at first I was a bit puzzled as to why these were placed out here, which I'll explain in just a second. So there are two different endings to this level that can be achieved depending on whether the requirements have been met or not. In the first ending, we can see Glitchtrap appear from behind this curtain, and off camera, we can watch as they load in, stretching the arm unnaturally far in order to open the curtain. Their animation will continue as they beckon the player to follow them, and afterwards, they'll move out of sight again before unloading. Now, when the player enters the show stage, the previous area will be unloaded, and the main hub location will then load in. We'll also find that the Glitchtrap, previously seen dancing in the void, is actually in front of the prize counter. At this point, we're performing on stage as Freddy Fazbear, but when viewing this cutscene from a different angle, we'll find that the stage is completely empty. In the VR version of the game, the player will be holding Freddy's microphone, but because we're currently in the flat mode, there is nothing to be found. Restarting the night and heading back to the party room, we can take a look at this game's hidden ending by entering the employees only door on our right. We can see that there is a one-sided, flat plane placed here, as well as some snow particles that blow into the room. Going through this door will take the player to this snowy outdoor location, which I believe takes place in front of a Christmas tree lot. There's some construction equipment, a billboard that reads, "Coming soon, now hiring," and what looks like a large structure being built in the distance. Moving the camera back, we can see that this area is actually pretty massive, and it's full of interesting props that we can only typically see from far away, including some bloody snowballs, as well as a couple of wooden sheds with danger high voltage signs on the wall, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense considering there are no electrical appliances in or near them. Maybe there's electrical lines underground. I don't know. What's most interesting in this area though are these huge silhouettes on the far side of the map. When viewed up close, we can see that there are 3 flat images placed behind one another, and they appear to be of a building that is still under construction. Although this trick is pretty simple in nature, you wouldn't really be able to tell that these weren't 3D structures with the post-processing effects enabled. Just off to the side, there's also a massive crane, and this object is also completely flat. Zooming a lot further out, we can see how big this mountain range is compared to the level itself, and the size difference is kind of insane. Beyond that, there isn't really a ton for us to look at on this map, but it's definitely cool to see from a different perspective. Finally, let's have a quick look at the Glitchtrap cutscenes that can take place in the hub. So after the player collects each of the hidden tapes, they'll be instructed on how to defeat Glitchtrap, and after receiving these instructions, they'll then appear in the hub where they try to merge with the player. If they are successful, we'll be moved to their position after the screen goes purple, ultimately leading to a game over screen. Brightening things up, we can see that the area this cutscene takes place in is quite a bit different than the hub we typically see. The floor extends outwards behind us and breaks into these smaller squares. The stage in front of us is mostly empty as well, and we can see straight out of bounds behind it. We can also watch from a different angle as Glitchtrap merges with the player, which looks pretty cool, even with the lighting effects disabled. If the player stops the merge from being completed, we will instead be moved to another location where we're standing in front of a large metal door. When looking through the keyhole, Glitchtrap will appear and shush the player before disappearing into the distance as we're sent back to the main hub. With the lights on, we can take another look at this cutscene, where we'll see that this door is actually connected to what I believe is the West Hall from the Pizza Party minigame. As you can see, Glitchtrap is standing directly out of our view, and will remain idle until we interact with the door. Once activated, they'll lean over and peek through the keyhole before backing out of the player's sight and freezing in place. And with that, we've reached the end of the Night Terrors minigames, and as such, our dive into the non-DLC levels of Help Wanted. We've still got a handful of minigames to check out in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC, so make sure you're subscribed, that way you'll get notified when my next video releases. Thanks for watching, and cheers!